Episode 10. No more contracts. 3 days passed before Lena returned to Adrian's office with the completed manuscript. The rain that had dominated the previous week was gone. Morning sunlight filled the city, reflecting sharply off the endless rows of glass towers that surrounded Voss Tower. From the executive floor, the skyline looked almost endless. Lena paused outside Adrian's office door for a moment before entering. For a week she had walked through that door as a journalist. Today felt different. Today she was bringing him the story that might change how the world saw him. Inside, Adrian stood near the windows again. It had become his natural position in the room, as if he preferred seeing the entire city rather than sitting behind the desk. That technically belonged to him. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "You look serious," he said. "That is because I finished the manuscript." Adrian's expression shifted slightly. "You finished it already?" Lena walked toward the table and placed a thick stack of printed pages in front of him. 243 pages. "That is impressive. Do not sound surprised." "I am not surprised," Adrian said calmly. "I am curious." "About what?" "About what you wrote?" Lena folded her arms. "You asked for honesty." "I did." "And you insisted the truth mattered more than your reputation." "Yes." She gestured toward the manuscript. "Then everything you told me is in there." Adrian walked slowly toward the table. For a moment he simply looked at the pages. "The story of his life. Not the public version, the real one. You included my father," he said quietly. "Yes." "You made that the turning point." "Yes." Adrian picked up the first few pages and flipped through them slowly. Lena watched him carefully. "This is the moment where most writers would become nervous," she said. "Why?" "Because powerful people tend to remove things they do not like." Adrian continued reading for another minute before placing the pages back down. "I will not change anything." Lena studied his expression. "You did not even ask what I wrote. You would not have written it if you did not believe it belonged there." "That is a lot of trust." Adrian looked up at her. "That is the point." The room grew quiet. Outside the windows, the city moved through its usual rhythm. Traffic flowed through the streets far below. Helicopters crossed the skyline in the distance. Life continued. But inside the office, the moment felt strangely still. Lena said slowly. "Most people who reach your level of success become very careful about their public image." "That is true. You're doing the opposite." "Yes." "Why?" Adrian walked toward the window again. "For most of my life," he said, "I believed success would erase the past, and it did not." "No." He looked out across the city. "Success only makes people assume the past never existed." Lena stepped closer to him. "And now you want them to see it?" "Yes, that is a risk." Adrian turned slightly. "I built my entire company by taking risks. That is business. This," he said quietly, "is personal." Lena watched him for a moment. Then she said something she'd been thinking about for days. "When I started writing this book," she said slowly, "I thought it would be about ambition." Adrian glanced at her. "But it turned into something else." "What?" "A story about the cost of believing in someone." Adrian studied her carefully. "And was it worth the cost?" Lena looked toward the manuscript on the table. "I suppose that depends on the ending." "And what ending did you write?" She stepped closer. "The one where the truth changes everything." Adrian seemed to absorb that quietly. Then he asked something softer. What about you? What about me? You wrote my story." "Yes." "You finished the contract." "Yes." "And now?" Lena leaned lightly against the table. "And now the contract ends." The words settled in the air. Adrian stopped in front of her. "That sounds final." "It is. But the story between us does not feel finished." Lena met his gaze. "No," she admitted quietly. "It does not." Adrian studied her face carefully. "When this began," he said, "you were a journalist who needed a job." "Yes." "And I was a man who needed someone to write his story." "Yes. But somewhere along the way, that arrangement became something else." Lena nodded slowly. Yes, it did. Adrian stepped closer. And now the question is simple. What question? What happens when the contract ends? Lena thought about it for a moment. Then she smiled slightly. Well, she said, you could always hire me again for another book. No, for another story. Adrian looked amused. And what story would that be? She stepped closer until only a few inches separated them. The one that happens next. Adrian's hand lifted gently to her waist. And this story does not require a contract? No. Why not? Because, Lena said softly, some stories are better when they happen naturally. Adrian looked down at her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he leaned down and kissed her. The kiss was slower than the one they had shared days earlier, not driven by tension, driven by certainty when they pulled apart. Lena rested her forehead lightly against his. You know something interesting? She said. What? The entire city thinks you're the most dangerous man in business. And you disagree? She smiled. No. Adrian raised an eyebrow. That was not reassuring. Lena laughed softly. I just think they misunderstood what makes you dangerous. And what is that? You are willing to tell the truth. Outside the windows, the sun climbed higher above the skyline and for the first time since the project began, the story between them felt complete.